Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ricky Tell, University of Florida, and today we have a really nice presentation for the Society of Agricultural Communications Scholars. Courtney Myers at Texas Tech will discuss the Fulbright Scholar Experience, and so we're glad to have her and so many folks here online on Zoom to hear that. Just a couple of really quick things. Number one is you're welcome to ask questions. We usually leave that to the presenter, whether the presenter likes to take questions as it goes along or at the end. So I'll let Courtney make that decision. And then after Courtney's presentation and question and answer time after that, there'll be time for us to kind of go around if there are any updates you would like to share with the group overall. Again, webinars are usually at this time on the fourth Mondays of the month, and we'll talk more about the next presenters afterwards. So I'm going to leave plenty of time right now for Courtney to talk about what she experienced in her Fulbright. Courtney?
All right. Well, thank you all very much. And as we would say in Australia, good day. How you going? And I still catch myself in the hallway greeting people like that and getting strange looks in return. So I'm going to assume that everybody can see my beautiful family. Yes, very good. So I titled this "Give It a Go," my Fulbright Scholar Experience. That's one of the expressions we heard quite a bit. She'll be right, give it a go, no dramas, no worries. And that was just a really nice way to live for 5 months. So this is, I forced my family to get family portraits taken while we were there. This is near the Murrumbidgee River in front of a red gum tree, beautiful trees. We could hear the kookaburras laughing at us as we got our pictures. It's a photo I'll treasure forever. So I kind of have a prepared spiel that I'll walk through, and then I'll be happy to take questions at the end. Just for my own timing, I'm afraid if you stop to ask me questions as we go, I'll never get through it all. And there may be things that I answer as we go. So everyone likes a good dog picture. So here we go. This is me with the Kelpie, just to make sure I still have your attention. Today, what I hope to do is to just share my Fulbright activities and summarize a bit of what I learned through my experience. I'm going to discuss some potential for AgCom education and research, and I'll say AgComs because they would say comms, like they would call mathematics maths instead of just math. So I'll try to use that language today. And then finally, I want to end with some advice for applying for a Fulbright, doing a Fulbright, and then what it might look like when you come home from a Fulbright. It was a very big unknown to me. So anything I can do to help share my experience, even if you don't go to Australia, the Fulbright experience is similar no matter where you choose to go. So I assume most of us know or have heard of what a Fulbright is, but just so that we're all on the same page, this is a U.S. State Department funded program that supports university, it could be students, faculty, staff, administrators, researchers, to conduct some sort of international program where you go, you live, you work, you experience what it's like to live in another country, with the goal of fostering a mutual understanding and exchange of culture. And it is the flagship international academic exchange program sponsored by the US government. So it was nice to it helped speed up the visa application process when you're part of the Fulbright program. So my Fulbright story started a long time ago, and it was a long time coming. This was a practice in persistence and patience at times. So in 2018, I really started to kick off looking for more concrete opportunities to do a Fulbright. Then I traveled to Australia in 2019 to start to lay the framework and find a host institution to support me. In the fall of 2019, September, I applied for the Fulbright. I made it past the first round. And then in February of 2020, I found out I didn't get it. Then March happened. We all know this timeline. And then late March, early April, I got an email that they had a Fulbright opportunity for me and wanted me to interview for it. And it was the perfect fit. So I share that because don't let failure set you back too far, because you never know what might be around the corner. But then COVID kept sticking around, and Australia locked down their borders a lot. And so we had to just kind of hold tight through 2021. And then really about this time last year, I was like, if we don't do it now, it's never going to happen. And so I started to ramp up my plans to go. And we went in July, and I stayed through December 7th in country. So these were my project goals. And just to quickly summarize these, I wanted to create some teaching case studies of issues as they played out in Australia and how they were communicated. I wanted to examine media coverage of agricultural issues there. I wanted to explore the potential for an AgComs curriculum in Australia. And then I was supported by the Regional Universities Network. So I wanted to travel and explore other universities under that category or go to conferences that related to that. And that was the bonus. That was the award that they said, you're a better fit for this. And I'm so glad that all worked out. So just a quick glance at Australia. Here it is. I was able, through my Fulbright, to travel to all the states and territories except WA, Western Australia, which is a big chunk of the country. But Australia is big. I think it's easy to overlook just how big it is. So here it is as an overlay to North America. And I went to a conference in Tasmania, and I flew into Hobart, way down there on the southern end, basically Cancun. And then my family, we went to Darwin during our holiday. So I went all the way up there toward what would be Canada. So it is a big place. I couldn't see it all, but I tried to see as much as I could. I also, this map, there's a couple things happening. It's showing you that the equivalent, like how many US states would be encompassed roughly within each of these Australian states and territories. And then the other smaller US map here, it is showing the population. So what US state population is similar to an Australian. And what this really helps point out is just how small the population is in Australia. So we often in Texas say, you know, everything's bigger in Texas, and our population is. There are more people living in Texas than Australia. Most of the country is very rural. They actually have rural, regional, and remote because of the distinction of just how remote things can get. So this helps show you just most of the population is centered around the coast, and particularly down in the southeast, which is where I was. So I was in New South Wales, and I was in this little town called Wagga Wagga. Wagga Wagga is a beautiful place, about 70,000 people. And I was working at Charles Sturt University that had a campus there. So I would be remiss if I didn't show you at least one video of kangaroos during this presentation. So this is me driving to work on a spring day. He's checking out the sign, making sure he's going the right direction, goes back to tell his mom. There they go. So I don't know how well that worked over the Zoom, but I did have to dodge kangaroos on my drive onto campus. It never got old. I never took that for granted. This is a picture way underneath at the bottom of this tree. You can see a building, and that's where the food court was, that I could walk to and get a cup of coffee or have lunch. And then the other picture is the building where I was working on campus. As I mentioned, Wagga Wagga is considered a regional city. It had 70,000 people. It was perfect. It had Kmart. Kmart's big there. It had Woolworths and other, you know, it had everything that I might need. And it was easy to get around in. So we walked quite a bit, but we could also drive confidently on the other side of the road. So there's my girls. We loved the Botanic Gardens. It was free, and they had an aviary. So we went there quite a bit. And then there's another picture in the Murrumbidgee River. All right, so my Fulbright, I like to think about my Fulbright as a Venn diagram, where there was a circle of things that I planned to do, and this circle of things that I didn't plan to do. And what I actually did was somewhere in the middle. So I went in with all these big expectations, but then all these other cool things started to happen as I met people and started to network. So I'm gonna share, this is what I did. So I got to go to a few industry events, field days, like they have research development corporations that focus on doing the research, kind of like, it's like our extension model. They do the research and then they share that with producers, with farmers. And so I went to a couple of those field days and research updates. I went to conferences in Canberra, the Barossa Valley, which is South Australia, and then Tasmania. Those conferences were focused on ag issues that were more cross-cutting, or about issues impacting education for rural, regional, and remote students and the people that are in those communities. I interviewed agricultural communicators, people who work in the profession and are doing that work every day. I did explore media representations of agriculture, and just watching TV led me to look into a few things that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. I've got some teaching case studies. I'm going to roll a couple out to test in my class this semester. Analyze social media content. There was a foot and mouth disease scare right when I got there. They had detected it in Indonesia, and that's a very popular tourist destination. So we were analyzing that content. And then I just drank lots of really good coffee and had a lot of great conversation. I think that's, you know, as a social scientist and someone who works in a communications field, we can't undervalue the importance of those personal connections and those personal relationships. And I'll try to share some stories here as I go. So what did I learn? Well, snakes can be a problem, so much so that the university had this very formal sign printed. This happened, I was there during the winter into spring, and so this sign was up the week I was leaving. But I learned that there are snakes on campus. I learned that many of the issues that they're facing and they're talking about in their classrooms and in their community, their commodity organizations and in stakeholder meetings are similar to what we're dealing with. So you can see some of those highlighted here on this slide. So a lot of emphasis on environment. I thought that they were doing a much better job about speaking up regarding climate change, sustainability. There's a lot of research about asparagopsis, which is used to limit or reduce methane production in cattle. There was just a lot more conversation around that in the meetings I went to. And I think that weather extremes is a big part of that. So while we were there, they were having unusual amounts of rain. It was flooding. We were in flood alerts. People kept telling me this is not normal. We haven't had to deal with this in years. And then when it's hot, it's really hot. They have bushfires, and those are prominent. So they're dealing with a lot. And so that climate piece is really front and center. But they're also dealing with the rural workforce and labor shortages. They rely a lot on backpackers for labor. And when COVID happened and they shut down the borders, it's been hard to get people back into the country. I mean, I'm proof of that. It took 18 months of just waiting around to see if I could go. Biosecurity is always a concern for them. And then there's some others in that other column from the urban-rural divide, which we deal with. Internet access is still a major concern there, and the ability to get farmers information and those tools that rely on the internet. Yeah, so there's lots of great things happening. They're dealing with a lot of those prominent ag issues that we deal with here. So this is the Ag Palms landscape. I'll be happy to share more about this, but I visited with a lot of people. I met with a lot of organizations. I watched a lot of television, listened to radio and podcasts, and just tried to really put myself in that role of like, how would I gather information if I lived here and needed this information? And I could see four main purposes, goals to say for that AgCom's effort. And that might be extending research and development, taking research from the field to those farmers who could use it, advocating for the industry, both among the producer groups and then to those people who live in the big smoke, who live in the big cities on the coast, or people who work in the, lobbying and policy, the legislature. Certainly there's a presence for reporting news and current events and helping those in agriculture feel like they're apprised of recent developments and changes. And then storytelling, helping tell the story of the bush, people who live in the rural areas and feeling connected to each other, as well as a way to elevate their life to those people who are now several generations removed. And again, I think we can see some similarities here to what we do in our classrooms. One of the fun stories on this slide, I was looking through a Grazier magazine at the public library. I got a public library card while I was there. And I ran across an article that was written by my landlord. So I had an Airbnb, just a random find online. And I knew her name because we had connected and exchanged emails, but I just reached out to her, called her up and said, would you sit down with me for an interview? And she owns this social herd that you see the logo there, and she's developing marketing materials to promote farms. And so we just had a great chat about how she got into that line of work and her recommendations. And it just, again, it proves that power of connection of just when you meet one person, they might introduce you to another. And I was always amazed by these unique partnerships that I could find while I was there. So there are some opportunities for AgCom. It does not exist as a formal degree anywhere. And I asked everyone I interviewed, I said, have you heard of this as a formal degree? I asked, where did you go to school? How did you get to where you are today? So I felt fairly confident making this claim, but there is interest. One person I interviewed runs a national communications agency, has a lot of big brands such as Woolworths, which is their big grocery store chain. And she said that these types of programs would be the recruiting ground for their employees. Like they would go there to try to recruit people to work for her company. Another person told me there's a massive space for this in Australia. And those who are working in this told me that they keep busy because they're working to fill this void. They recognize that there needs to be more of this communication effort in one of those four categories I had earlier. And then another person told me, in regard to these efforts, we can do more. So I will pause and ask, does anybody know what the yellow is in this picture?
Is it canola?
It is canola. That's correct. So I had never seen canola. Great job. I'd never seen canola in person, and we climbed up this, it was called the Rock. And you could see these patches of yellow across the landscape. And I just think it's like God took a highlighter and just highlighted. It was amazing how bright they were. So that's flowering canola, because again, I was there during the spring. So it was a great time to be there. So if you're interested in going to Australia and doing some sort of AgCom's research, there's plenty to do. Yeah, maybe you could do it from here, but what's the fun in that? So here are some categories, some areas that I left feeling like, okay, I'm finally getting a handle on this. And I think it's like it's starting any new job, right? It takes a few months to feel like you found your place and your rhythm. And unfortunately, then I had to come home. So these are areas, so provenance storytelling, they're very, very proud of Australian made, that this is an Australian product. So they've done some work in provenance storytelling, but there's not much research that I could find evaluating those efforts or seeing how effective they were. Australia produces they export 70% of their agricultural production. So they are very export focused, but internally they're very proud of what they have. And so provenance storytelling was a theme that came up, and I think more work could be done on that. Labeling, how things are produced, method of production. So free range, cage free, caged eggs. There were, it was easier to find cage free eggs than caged at sometimes. And so there's those methods of production in terms of animal agriculture are very important to Australian consumers. Community sentiment and trust. So how much do people trust and value agricultural enterprises or rural industries? That was a big theme. Extension communication. I think many of us know what I mean by that, but taking that agricultural research and getting it out to people who can use it to motivate behavior change. They were much more critical of their communications and extension efforts than I would have ever been. But people who work there and are trying to change farmers' minds and production practices that are based on tradition from generations would often share their frustration with me about getting that done. But I think that's probably true here as well. There's transparent communication and social license to operate is an important area. That's the idea of like having the right to farm, the right to do things that you think are the best for your farm without external influences. Natural resources, education, communication. I think so much could be done in this area, along with the community-based social marketing around environmental behaviors. While I was there in New South Wales, a single-use plastics ban went into effect. And it was really interesting to see how restaurants, grocery stores, other enterprises reacted to that ban. I mean, it required some behavior change on all of us. And so I think there's some things we can learn from how they're encouraging those behaviors. Values-based communication, the idea of, we've been doing this in the US for a little bit about shared values and communicating shared values. That's something that they could work on a bit more. And by their own admission, they're starting to do that more. I attended a couple workshops focused on that. And then, as I mentioned, there's no AgCom curriculum as it stands today. So there's room to do that. Again, I was very cautious to be the American coming in and saying this is how things should be done. I was more proposing trying to get a better sense of their education system and how we could, create opportunities for students who want to remain in agriculture but don't see that pathway right now. Okay, so in the next few minutes, I just want, hopefully now you're sitting there going, oh man, I want to do that. Like, I sign me up. So I just want to talk through some key advice. And then if any of you start this Fulbright journey, I'll be happy to visit with you more. I really struggled to find anyone who had taken their children. And so I have some advice on that. But before you apply, this is actually a picture of me. If I look younger in that picture, you're right. That was in 2019 when I went to Charles Sturt the first time. So just want to give some advice about before you apply. Thanks for being here to talk to someone who's done a Fulbright. I think that's the first thing, is to get a better sense of what does that look like? What does that entail? And attend seminars on your campus or online. I remember attending a webinar online about how to do your application. And I reviewed the website extensively to find other resources. I sat down and talked to a couple people who had done Fulbrights, and I got a better sense of what people might look for in the application. Each of the awards is different depending on where you want to go, how long you want to be there. Or do you want a research only? Do you want a teaching only? I didn't have a teaching appointment at all. Mine was 100% research. And this is actually a screenshot from the award I got. I'm not sure if they're actively, if this one's open right now. I think it may have closed as they reviewed applications, but this one I would say is an incredible opportunity to not be in one of the big cities. If you want to be out in the country, in the bush a bit, this is a good one for Australia, and other countries may have similar opportunities. Connect with people. either in person or virtually, if you can. You do need a host. You need someone to agree to host you. So, and they have to write a letter for you. And then investigate policies and procedures for professional development leave at your institution. What will your institution do to support you? How will they fill in while you're gone? Do they have resources to help you apply? So when I applied, I had an application. These are the things that were in it. I'm not going to read them all to you, but it's not a lot in terms of page length, but it was a lot in terms of thoughtful development. Had to be pretty concise and to the point while I addressed all of these details. And then I submitted this and waited, and you go past an initial round that's just based on your application. And then if you get past that, they might invite you for an interview. Australia is a very popular country, everyone told me. So I applied for an open award under any category with Charles Sturt. And then thankfully, they found that better fit for me with the Regional Universities Network. This picture, congratulations, right? You've got it. Let's pretend you get your Fulbright. This picture was taken the day we left. This is all we took with us to Australia. So my family did go with me for the first half of my time, and I'll be happy to answer questions more about that decision. It wasn't an easy one, but it was the best one for our family. So when you get your award, notify your hosts that you've got it, start to work through. And again, this was a long tail for me, like from getting the award. And then my emails were always like, well, I guess we'll try again in 6 months. And then, but hopefully yours is a little bit quicker turnaround. They should have an orientation in the country. So I got there 2 days before my orientation, and we drove 3 hours from Wagga to Canberra. I'm glad I went. It was neat to be there. It's held at Parliament House. Very nice event. There's tons of paperwork. Just when you think you're done, there's more. I felt like that was my part-time job in the spring, last spring. Make sure your passport has plenty of time and complete the visa process. That was stressful, but they gave me step-by-step directions and it sailed through. I heard within 2 weeks that I got it. Look how cute my girls are. So my daughters are year 8 and year 6. We put them in school in Wagga. They went to school for a term. Again, I can answer more specifics about this. These were the moments that kept me up at night. And I tell you what, they thrived. I had no reason to worry about them going to school. They were the only Americans many of the students had ever met. And it was an incredible experience for them. So use in-country contacts as much as possible to find out about schools if that's relevant, banks, transportation options. I was out in the country and I needed a car. And so we hired a car and then we borrowed a car. So your host institution may have a car fleet. Unfortunately, mine sold them all off during COVID. And they might have on-campus housing. Again, with my family, this is our townhouse behind us. We went from a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house to a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom. We just got to know each other a little bit better. There's some other specifics on here that I just put them down. We don't have to go through them all. But it was really important for me just to document my experience. So if anybody wants help as they get closer to this, I can come back. Yeah, be prepared to put things on your credit card because it may take a while for your stipends to kick in the country. And then try to establish connections. So I had events to go to within the first 2 weeks. Actually, the first week before I officially started my Fulbright, I was presenting at a conference in Wagga. So I, wanted to get in there and introduce myself as quickly as I could. During your experience, set boundaries about what you want to do and what you don't want to do while you're there. I got to a point near the end of mine that I just had to say, I can't take any more meetings. Like I needed to wrap up what I had already started. And that was hard. I also needed to set boundaries about what still needed to be done from here and what could wait. What could somebody else handle? What could be shifted? The best part, right? out of office. I'm in Australia. But there were things that had to get done. Have a plan, but remain flexible. So this picture is from the Belmont Research Station near Rockhampton, Queensland. I was able to go up there because another Fulbrighter connected me with someone there. And again, that wasn't part of my original plan, but I had the time. And so I made an effort to go. And it was great to see a more cattle focused operation than the mixed farming operations that were around me in Wagga. Coffee there is very good. Very good coffee. I put this picture here as a way to represent taking time to reflect. There were moments that I could have just been go, 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 but I really needed to sit and reflect and be able to think about what I was learning, what else I needed to find out, who did I need to talk to. So you can see here, I put schedule less glamorous keyboard time. Like I would just schedule time that I was going to go to the library or that I would sit in my office on campus and work. And then keep good records as you go. I kept a blog. Some of you followed along on our adventures on my blog, but I also kept an internal journal that was more academic. And I needed that for my report. I didn't know I was going to need that, but I'm so glad I kept notes. I look a little tired in this picture because I was just like on the go. This is in the Barossa Valley. Network. So there were moments that I got really tired being extroverted, but I had to continue to introduce myself and connect with people. Once I started to speak, people paid attention, right? I had the accent, but it did take some effort. And then travel as much as you possibly can when you're on a Fulbright, no matter what country you go to. That is really just the best part of it. Mine came with additional funding to travel to these conferences that I got to go to, and then to Rockhampton. Ask other Fulbrighters to connect with you and just look for things that the conferences were the best use of my time, right? Because that's people come to a conference to talk to each other, network. So I was able to meet so many more people that way. All right, so some additional advice. If you're going to do this, if you're going to do any international research, apply for an IRB or ethics approval before you go, and then file it as soon as you get there. I didn't get mine approved, even though I filed it in July, it didn't get approved till mid-September. And so it took a while for it to work through their internal process. Keep up with important emails, required trainings, password updates, like I needed to update my password on my Texas Tech stuff so I didn't get locked out. And then check with your university about additional financial support. I'm very quick to say that I could not have afforded this without Texas Tech University. The Fulbright stipends were not enough to cover the expenses, and Texas Tech stepped up and helped me address that. I also think I would be remiss if I didn't include some pictures of koalas. So here you go. My daughters, I'll show this to them anytime they complain about me as their mother. I'll say, remember that time you got to hold a koala in Queensland? That might hold them off a little bit, but there they go. All right, so here's me in front of a ute, good times. After the award is done, you have some, I only had some reports, survey. That's where my notes came in handy. But then doing things like this, sharing your experience, I'll admit, like I was exhausted when I came back, and then I had to gear up to teach again this semester. This picture is from Tasmania, quick road trip I took there. You just, you need to be able to share what you did while it's fresh on your mind. And so I appreciate everyone coming today to allow me to do that. So some key reflections. I love this picture. Amelia, Daniel, and Isabel's right in front of him. We're climbing. This is in Kakadu National Park. If you've ever seen Crocodile Dundee, a lot of that was filmed in Kakadu. And we were going up to this rock, as you can see, other people were to sit and watch the sunset. So lots of beautiful sunsets. Take your family with you, whatever that may look like. Your partner, your spouse, your kids. It is worth the hassle, headache, and stress. This kept me up at night. I was very anxious about taking my family, but it was the best decision I made. People were really interested in this family from Texas, especially in Wagga Wagga. So my girls would start to see people they knew on the streets when we would go out for dinner. I mean, it was just this really cool sense of community. Definitely felt more at home when they were there than when they left and I stayed for 2 more months. And again, it helps us notice those similarities and differences, and we would talk things out. And I mean, for my kids' sake, I think they've really grown in their confidence and their ability to travel, and certainly their openness to other cultures. My favorite activities weren't in my proposal. And so the things that just came up as a nature of being there and networking and connecting with people. So I got to speak at their National Ag Day event. I was the keynote speaker. I got to travel, as you can see in several of these pictures. I visited the Royal Society for Agriculture in Sydney. I spent a day teaching agriculture at an all-boys school in Queensland. Just really cool things that I wouldn't have ever thought I could do. And I just stayed open to these opportunities. So in review, the Fulbright experience is life-changing. There's still things that I'm reflecting about my time there. If you're interested in a Fulbright, it's not too early to start researching campus resources, reaching out to people who have done one, and connecting with potential partners in your country of choice. And then again, take your family and enjoy every moment. I never wanted to take for granted that I was there. I still get choked up thinking about how cool this was. And I do owe it to a lot of people that supported me throughout this process, whether it was through encouraging emails, phone calls, texts, and then the Texas Tech, my colleagues here stepping up to fill in so I could take advantage of this. So I'm going to leave you with the sunset on Mendil Beach in Darwin, Northern Territory, and say I'm happy to take any questions in the time we have left.
Great. So if you have a question for Courtney, just go ahead and unmute or put it in the chat. Happy to hear what people have to ask and say. Anybody?
I have a question.
Go for it, Garrett. Sorry.
So you were there on a research, essentially. You were there for research purposes. So what does your so now that you're back, what does that research look like as far as, you know, they paid for you to be there or whatever? Do you have to publish in Australian journals? Where do you publish? What does that sharing that research and disseminating that research, where does that happen, considering you're not there where it happened, I guess?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I really thought they would be much more on top of me, like, these are the deliverables we expect, and they weren't at all. So I'm planning to submit some things to some upcoming conferences this year. I don't want to skew my reviewer pool here, that when you see something about Australia, but there are things that I'm starting to send out. I think the bigger thing, Garrett, is that I'm working to get a memorandum of understanding between that host institution and our institution to try to facilitate student exchanges, study abroad, faculty, short-term experience, exchanges. So for the Fulbright Commission, they were less interested in like those outputs than in the relationship building. And in like, how are you going to maintain this relationship? And, personally, we've worked together enough, that I'm going to try to get that research out there into the right avenues. But I really believe that some of the outcomes from my Fulbright experience may not pay off until a couple of years down the road when I have a few more pieces in place. But yeah, I will say that I was a little surprised. Like, I got there and I sent them an email and I'm like, hey, I'm here. And they're like, that's great. Yeah, just let us know if you have any problems. The only time I had to report or show any sort of effort was when I went to conferences. I had to write a report about what I learned, who I spoke with, how I promoted the Fulbright experience. Yeah.
Lacey, you had a question, I think, or a comment.
Yeah, so I'm sure you said this, Courtney, I had to join late, but how long were you there, first off?
I was there 5 months.
5 months. Okay. Just I've been interested in Fulbright for several years and kind of doing some of this like introductory, figuring out the space. Were you like, I guess when you applied, was it always with that research intention in mind, or did you kind of go back and forth between the research and the teaching? Because I kind of hear from multiple people, one is easier or better or than the other. And so just kind of in your insight, was that the whole purpose, or did you switch back and forth?
So the award that I applied for in Australia was only a research award. So each university that sponsors a Fulbright scholar or each award can determine, is it a research or is it a teaching? So in my case, it was just research. I would have loved to teach while I was there, but I'm really glad I didn't have to grade any papers for a semester. Yeah, I mean, it was really liberating. And it allowed me that flexibility to go to conferences and to meet with people. So Lacey, I would say it really depends on what country you're looking at and what the opportunity is. One of the people I visited with did a Fulbright, and he did have a teaching role. And he did have to like meet the semester timeframe that the term timeframe. So those opportunities are there. It just wasn't there for me. So I guest lectured when I could. And like I said, I went and taught a day and I told my sister all about it. I went and taught a day at a high school just to get that experience.
Jamie?
Hey, so hey Courtney, on one of your slides, you had a piece about looking at your university's professional leave process beforehand. So what order did you go about notifying the university? Did you talk about your sabbatical first and then go to Fulbright, or did you go to the Fulbright process first and then go to the university and say, hey, this is happening?
So I would say they were parallel at the beginning. I told our vice provost who oversees that, I told him I was applying for a Fulbright. And he said, great, let me know when you hear something. And then I emailed him, and kept him in the loop. Here at Texas Tech, getting a Fulbright is automatic sabbatical. Like I didn't have to go through another committee. I had to just submit my Fulbright materials and the letter that I had been selected. And that was it. So it was, I gave them the courtesy of a heads up. I'm applying for this. And I think internally he made a note of that in terms of how many sabbaticals they'll support each semester. But yeah, it was, at least here, is really seamless. I just was very honest with them from the get-go.
Awesome. And then my second question on that logistically is, in terms of school and work, for your husband and kids, did your kids go to public school in Australia? Was that?
So they did not. They went to a private school, and we paid for that. Mainly, so my girls are years 6 and 8, and in Australia, in most public schools, that means one of them would have been in elementary and one would have been in high school, secondary school. And because I didn't want to navigate 2 schools, we found a school that had like itty bitties all the way up to year 12, and they had a special middle school program, which is very unique. So it was a Christian school, but it had an agriculture farm. And so we actually did a Zoom call with the principal before we got there. And she asked the girls, what do you like to do? And she found them, she had friends lined up for them who met with them on the first day. So we went the private school route just because it was smaller and because of where our kids were aligned in their school system. And then my husband was working remote. He worked part-time here at that point in time, and then they just allowed him to work remotely from Australia.
Did he need a visa for that?
He wasn't paid by anyone in Australia.
Okay.
So,
cool.
I mean, they didn't care.
Other questions?
So I know I could ask her this on our nightly phone call, but one of the ag issues that I thought maybe come up, but you didn't have listed is how much of their land is government owned?
Yeah, you should have asked me that on a phone call. Uh,
It didn't,
No, I don't know that. I mean, I would say that, if you go back and look at that map about how remote things are, some of that land, again, that didn't come up much. I mean, many of the at least in the area I was in, it wasn't a concern in that area. I think when I went to Queensland, it was fascinating how different some of the ag issues and topics were, up in that area. But no, I'd have to look into that a little bit more. I will say they were very proud that they don't get as many subsidies as American farmers do. That they are very self-sufficient farmers that don't rely on government support.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Did you have like the other Fulbrighters that were there in Australia or in the same like system that you were in? Did you get to know them well? Were there any that this was, you know, their second, third, I don't know how many Fulbrights you can do, or like had previously had Fulbright experiences?
So honestly, not really. So the one Fulbrighter I met at the orientation in agriculture at CQ Uni, which is in Rockhampton, he was from Ohio State. The Ohio State. And I think maybe in the Worcester campus there. He was great. Like we would email each other, and he was there before me, but he also left before I did. So we weren't able to connect. There weren't any other Fulbrighters at my institution. And in fact, Garrett, I'm not sure if they had ever had a Fulbrighter by the number of times I had to explain what the Fulbright program was. And so a lot of people just thought I was a PhD student there to study. Flattering, yes, but I didn't have a ton of that in-country Fulbrighter networking. If I had lived in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane, they did. They had alumni events, they had socials. So I guess that's one of those, like, you know, pros and cons of me being out in Wagga Wagga instead of in Sydney. But I would not have wanted to live in the city. I really loved being out in the country. Lacey has another question.
Yeah, I've got any questions for you. I'll email you later too. But so one of them, just thinking about, and you may have already said this, I'm really sorry. Had you been to the university prior, like on a study abroad or something? Is that where you initially started your relationship with that home institution?
I had been there before in 2019, but I will say that this is where the flexibility came in, because two of the people that I had visited with and have, you know, worked with via email, by the time I got there in 2022, one had left the university and one had shifted his roles at the university so much that he wasn't the right person for me to be working with. Okay. So there was a little bit of like, what am I going to do? But I'm not going to give up this opportunity for that. Texas Tech had a partnership with Charles Sturt before I went, so I leveraged that relationship. But I would say, you know, there's a lot you can do via Zoom, but I mean, I really appreciated being able to go there in person, so that when I was telling my husband about this crazy idea of moving halfway around the world, I could say I've been to Wagga Wagga. It's like Manhattan, Kansas. You'll love it. It's a great community. But long answer short, yes, I had been there before.
Okay, so did that help with that, getting that host institution letter, or was there some confusion since some of those people were kind of in and out of the institution?
I submitted my application in 2019. So by the time I visited in July 2019 and submitted my packet in September, everybody was still in place. It was from September 2019 to July 2022 that things shifted.
Okay.
But by then I had the award and I was going.
Anyone else? If not, let's thank Courtney, virtual or whatever hand clapping there. Thank you very much, Courtney. Appreciate it so much. This is the time that if you have any announcements or things you'd like to share with the group, please feel free to do so. Either raise your hand or unmute your microphone and have at it.
Oklahoma State is about to have gobs and gobs of assistantships posted. So if you've got students that want to live in Oklahoma where they get wind, rain, snow, like any weather you can imagine except a hurricane, we even have earthquakes, just little ones though. So, but we should be posting some of those out pretty soon.
Very good. Anyone else? Well, it is, if not, it is that season of the year as we get ready for conference season coming up. We have several of our professional associations, academic associations coming up in April, May, and June-ish. So I would definitely encourage all of us on the call here to attend as many as your budget can hold, can do, and also to encourage graduate students. Be a lot of great opportunities coming up in the very near future, right about the time the spring semester ends. So I hope to see everybody in person at one or more of the conferences coming up. In the meantime, we still have some opportunities to meet on webinars in the next couple of months as well. This date, March 27th, 1 month from today, we'll have Keisto, Audrey, and Laurie Baker discussing the field's expectations for agricultural communications master's program. And then April 24th will be our last webinar of the 2022-2023 year. Well, Kelsey Hall will be talking about modeling and building relationships across race, ethnicity, and gender. So I hope to see everybody for the next two webinars. And again, Courtney, thank you so much for your presentation today. If there's no other comments or questions, everybody have a great afternoon. Thanks. Bye.